What's up everyone, this is Dariusz Kalbarczyk, co-founder of MG Poland, JS Poland, AngularMaster.dev and WorkshopFest.dev. Welcome back to the Angular Master podcast. Today we've got a special guest from Prague, Czech Republic. Head of Engineering at FlowUp, Angular, TypeScript and web performance enthusiast. Ladies and gentlemen, Vojtech Mašek. Hi Vojtech, how are you?
I'm pretty good. Had a very productive day today.
Amazing. So for those who don't know you yet, please tell us about yourself.
I'm head of engineering in a small development company in Czech Republic. We focus mainly on Angular for web applications and in combination with cloud-based applications. So, many clouds. We are Google cloud partners, so we prefer Google, but not exclusively, of course. And we are developing Angular applications for clients for quite some time now. It is basically as long as Angular as we know it in the newer versions exist. I was shipping my first application to production with Angular using a version that was in alpha, and then we went to beta, and then we went to release candidates, and it was a lot of fun because those that remember release candidates know what I'm talking about. But since then, it was all amazing that you can do the updates pretty easily and not much of breaking changes anymore. So all is fine.
How did your adventure in programming begin?
I started as a student at the university, and since my father was a computer enthusiast, as you can say it, because I'm from Europe, so there were countries like post-communism. Computers were not really a huge thing, and if you wanted something, it would be very expensive. And he was one of the people that were enthusiastic and were investing money in it. So from a little kid, I was already amazed by computers. And then I went to study, you can say computer science, or like it was a joint like electrician and networking and everything basically. So I know a little bit of all. And I started programming early with assembly, with C, with Java. Yeah, and slowly it turned into an obsession where I could, when I see something, I am trying to figure out how it works. So that led into me developing a bunch of small microprocessors and creating my own kits. And then I went to university, and there I programmed a lot. I worked on a Fedora project, like Linux for a little bit. Then I like in a university lab, and a bunch of other things. And then I started my own company while studying. And then they threw me. I was kicked out of the school because I wasn't really paying attention to it anymore. And now it has been my 5th year in that said university, where I actually had a lecture on using Angular for advanced information systems. So I had a very rough and fun path in my life to get into software engineering.
Why did you choose Angular?
Very good question. I didn't choose it myself. I somehow I was somehow stuck with it after one of my friends that he actually started the company with me. There were 4 of us, and the whole company basically was created in a hackathon, like these events where you hack around and create something. So we created something, and it was created using the I think it is Knockout from Microsoft, a very old tech, like from today's perspective. and it was pretty good. Like it was basically my first time using JavaScript, or second maybe, because up to that point I knew how to use Python, C, C++, Java, but never JavaScript, and it was fun. It was less fun with Knockout because it was CoffeeScript, and I didn't like it. And for some reason, like people usually like CoffeeScript, I didn't. And then we went into AngularJS with CoffeeScript, and then basically overnight it was rewritten again into new Angular, the alpha version. And since that point, I basically fell in love with TypeScript, and everything was like, this is how I imagine it looking and working, and the whole the stuff that we currently take for granted, like class-based system and dependency injection, how it worked back then. I loved it because that was the type of architecture that I expected from a front-end project, and I didn't really like the whole scope that is global everything. And
What do you like about Angular as your front-end tool of choice?
I mentioned the dependency injection and TypeScript, of course. I'm big fan of both of these choices, and what I then like really is the whole, like, people say about Angular that it is opinionated, which is true. Angular is opinionated, but only in a way where you are still allowed to do your own thing. Like, you can still use your own router, and there are cases where people write and use their own file-based router, or you can still use your own state management, whatever else. You can basically change parts, and I like this really much, where there are batteries included in a framework. You can start, you can do your own things if you really want to, but you will always end up in a structure or in a projects that are very similar. And that is, like, if you would say that, why would I, as a head of development in some random company, choose Angular for developing front end? I would say it's because every time we start a new project or we onboard people on all the projects, it is very similar. Everything is very similar. They already know where to look for things. They already have some kind of feeling for the architecture. Lazy loading is done in the same way. The state management, you are probably, either 1, 2, or 3 cases switching on a like different implementations. But even these implementations are very similar. So you are not really stuck in a presence where you would be wandering around trying to onboard people for a long time, and then once you onboard someone, you will change front-end library.
What are your favorite tech topics on front-end development?
My favorite tech topics are definitely lazy loading, optimizing for size, which is closely connected to it, but not exclusively, because we all know that we can optimize for size with things like, fonts and images and a lot of other stuff beside code and splitting of the application. And then I really like runtime performance, because that is something that I also do basically daily. We optimize for performance. Yeah, you had Michael Hladky here a few times, so all of this that he talks about, usually we are implementing it, and it's fun. I really enjoy making applications faster, either to load or to use.
You're listening, Angular Master Podcast. Listen, code, repeat. Everything you need to know to become an Angular super developer.
How important are lazy loading and bundle size optimization in production?
I would say they are very important, And in some of my talks that are connected to the bundle size and lazy loading, I already said that you should at least observe bundle size and your whole performance before you ship to production. Because when you actually focus after you shipped everything, you are at the state where you cannot really change much, or you have to do all these non-disruptive things first, or it is really hard to optimize after you shipped something. And if you start before, then at least acknowledging some of the things, some of the technical depth, you can start to prepare for what will come next. Yeah, for example, with Angular, it is pretty easy to do the lazy loading with routers. So you can already know that, okay, even though we don't optimize on routes, we want to in future, and you will put these let's call it items into your development cycle. So definitely, like, do everything you can before you actually ship, because after you ship, you are in a state where it will be very hard to.
What do you think about the direction Angular framework is going in regard to front-end optimization?
It is going in a very good direction. Things are getting easier, which is amazing. I also like to see when things are not only easier, but also type safe, which is also happening. A lot of stuff that you could only hack in like last years are now done properly with dynamic imports and type safe, which is very nice. And like, this is not only the how the router load children have changed, but it is basically the fact that Angular CLI is based on Webpack, and Webpack has its own dynamic import, which is very powerful. And like, again, in some of the talks I go into very specific details on how can you do interesting things with the Webpack dynamic import. And I would say that this direction is only going to get better. Often people ask me on how, like, what is my opinion on the web usage of Webpack itself underneath, because like, we know that in 16 there will be probably at least first steps to Vite or Vite, or sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it, but that one, or the RSpec that was also announced, which is Webpack based, so that is nice. I think that because they are using the dynamic import in the route, they will have to support this case. So once they support the dynamic import, everything is good, and we can move on to something else, because all applications will work the same. This would be amazing if there was a seamless migration. And then all the other things, the more we decouple from like huge file-based chunking problems that we have because of how Webpack works and how basically the whole front-end functions with bundling, the better state we get of how applications are loaded. For example, I really like the change of standalone components or standalone everything. I think it is a great steps to take to make the applications actually load what they need. And I will be glad to see more and more of these.
When should people start to optimize?
I'm a fan of optimizations. As you might tell, usually I am the one doing the optimization. So from my perspective, it is, the sooner the better. But honestly, from the perspective of someone who is maybe on a management level too, I would say that optimizations are needed when there are noticeable bottlenecks. And that's where you either have to know what you are doing or have someone who knows what they are doing and start optimizing. And with every optimization, it should be measurable. And not only measurable, you should be absolutely sure that what you are introducing is actually making an impact. And that is something that we basically, do in our everyday work. We first measure, we audit, we, create the problem definition and try to exactly identify what is the point of that optimization, and then offer a fix for it. We will not blindly just go and randomly, put something somewhere and then run the application again and say, okay, it is a half second faster. It doesn't work like that. You have to exactly know what you are doing. And you also have to recognize that sometimes the optimization is, bringing benefit or at least not making it worse, but it is maybe not something that will uniquely fix all your problems. Sometimes you need to do 10 or 100 of similar, let's call it small things, and then you see some kind of improvement, because otherwise you wouldn't. And this whole topic is it's very complicated when it comes to nailing down what actually has the biggest impact and what is the most desirable. Usually you could do it in a way where you say, let's do the biggest impact, lowest effort first. This will get you a buy-in from the stakeholder, from your boss, from, I don't know, whoever you need to talk to. You will get rid of the technical debt along the way. They will be glad that they see an actual improvement, and slowly you end up in a state where there are no more low-hanging fruits and you will need to do a proper auditing again. Which is, again, not a bad thing. It's just that some optimizations are harder to land, especially if you are not allowed to break things because you are in production.
Are there tools that you use and recommend?
I like to recommend, or I like to start even my talks with the tooling section, because without the tools, you cannot measure. Without the measurements, you don't know what you are doing. So, one that I start with is usually the bundle phobia. If we are talking about bundles, then this, little website called Bundle Phobia, it's amazing, because even if you do not have the, underlying knowledge of what it actually means, what is it showing you, it will tell you the sizes. And, by the first glance of a look, you can see there are loading times down there with 3G, with 4G. So you can already tell, okay, if I, use this library over this library or do this import, it will have some consequences. So Bundle Phobia, very good tool. Then there is something that will tell you similar stuff in your IDE, and that is import cost plugin, which is for both WebStorm and Visual Studio Code. Free plugin that will just on the imports tell you how big they are, approximately, of course. It is not something to go by, strictly, but you can have a feeling about, oh, maybe I don't want this whole Firebase imported in the start of my module. Maybe I want it lazy loaded. And we actually think about it this way, because every time I see something like that, when I come to a new code base, when I see something like that, I have my 10 go-to imports, which I definitely know create a horribly huge bundles. So I'll just go there, find, for example, Quill editor, rich text editor, and I will know, okay, how often do you use Quill in your front end? Oh, we need it just for this admin part. So why is your Quill editor imported in your app module? Well, it makes no sense. It should be imported dynamically or lazy loaded only for that route. And there are these things that you can then continue with and actually split the application. Other tools which will allow you to actually uncover these problems and have a good feeling about I know how visually my bundles look, and I can scroll in and read the bundle insights. And they are two two actual tools. One is the Webpack Bundle Analyzer. It takes the output of the Webpack build with Angular. You can just pass the stats.json flag to the build, and it will output a JSON. Then you just put into this tool. You get the whole visualization of the whole build, basically your dist folder. Everything will be there. Amazing tool. You can really scroll around. Angular team actually recommends something else, not the Webpack Bundle, different one. I've forgotten what is its name, but it can be found in the documentation. The main difference is that Webpack Bundle Analyzer is actually not 100% right. And, let's leave it this way. You cannot trust it blindly. For most of the applications or for most of the use cases, it is a good tool to use, have a look, but you cannot trust the numbers like 100%. Sometimes they are off. If you want to be 100% sure what is bundled and shipped, there is another tool which is called Bundle Wizard. And this one is actually using the recommended tool underneath. And its biggest advantage is that it will work on a served application. So even on the application that is deployed, you can use Bundle Wizard to preview what is imported, like what are the bundles that go through network. And as an addition to this, you will also see what code is actually executed. So it will glow green and red, so like the test coverage. It is also code coverage. So this code coverage is there, and it will tell you again approximately what is the unused code in your application or in the application you are observing. And you can take this information, see what bundles actually glow red or orange, and then realize, okay, so maybe parts of these bundles are not executed because there is ngIf in the template. So this whole component is never bootstrapped and placed into it. Or there are these, effects. The whole state management is shipped with my initial bundle, which is a case of almost every NGRX application I have seen. If you are creating global state management, then 99% of the times you are shipping your whole global state management with your application. Even if you split into feature modules, you have to be really careful about how you use them, because if they depend on each other, they will be there together. So all of these things come together, and with the tools, with the bundle analyzers, you can slowly but steadily identify parts that might be split or taken care of in a different way. Also, the Bundle Wizard will, if you load a page, for example, something that is behind login, it will actually allow you to log in first and then run the analysis. And then you will have the analysis of all the bundles. And everything you see there basically means that this was loaded for that page. So suddenly you may realize, even though my main bundle is small, let's say something arbitrary, 300 kilobytes, the shared bundles that I load are 10 megabytes, and they anyway need to be there. So even if I have mine very small, the shared ones can be huge. And I've seen this problem in again multiple applications. The worst example was where we loaded a list which we expected it will be, few megabytes, and it had 63 shared bundles. So for the display of the list, 63 shared bundles, which were all, huge size, all in all together almost 20 megabytes. were loaded just to render pretty simple list with sidebar.
What kind of IDE are you using?
I use WebStorm for a long time. I have no idea what led me to using WebStorm in the first place. Probably because I wanted a real IDE, and there was none in the market if you don't count the Visual Studio, and I mean the real Visual Studio, not the code version, because that is pretty young if you say it like this. Then there was the Atom, there was the Sublime, but they were not IDEs, so I wanted an IDE. And it really grew close to my heart. I'm so used to, my flow is so used to the WebStorm that I am really a power user. And I can only recommend it. All the stuff, people are asking me, how do you handle the refactorings, like when you rename something? Well, I don't. My WebStorm handles that. Or how do you make sure that it imports correctly? Well, I don't. I have my import restrictions in the WebStorm, and it does it all automatically.
When you are developing, what are the things you are most interested in and passionate about?
Type safety. For me, the type safety is the number one priority. And the only if I come into a code base where they don't respect this, I can already tell that it will be one of the first things I will be advocating for. And this is like that for a long time. Even again, few years ago, where TypeScript was not really a thing between other frameworks. Let's name them React and Vue. They were not TypeScript native. React was even using a different type system back then. And I encountered multiple times where I was basically advocating for proper typings in front-end applications, like on meetups or on conferences, having these discussions, and people were not really getting it, how it helps you to ship more better quality code. And I'm so glad that we are now living in a environment where this is basically a common thing. But I remember that I used to explain that first you have to type your state management, because if that is not typed, then everything is horrible. Then I'm also into typing the backend communication. For example, like with GraphQL, there is a beautiful link that will allow you to generate all the TypeScript models for the schema. I did my own generator for Swagger, because I was not satisfied with the one that there was in the Swagger editor. So yeah, I created my own tool there. Nowadays there are many, so you can generate the whole SDKs for the front end backend models. Yeah, that makes me really glad that it is a common thing in current applications. And then all kinds of you can say crazy stuff when it comes to architecture and lazy loading, because if you are able to achieve great splits or proper loadings or initializations with architecture, then I'm really early up for it. If you let your architecture live in the code and everything is nice with NX, for example, there's nothing better, because then everybody can easily see what's happening and how it will be distributed.
When starting a new project, how do you make sure that you achieve your goals for production-ready setup?
There is a checklist, of course. So we have a checklist. It is not something fancy. It is really just how to generate, what to use, what to prefer, what to already put there. I can name few things. So generate new projects using NX. even though, and that is something that I already talked to like NX developers, even though you are not planning to use monorepo, use NX, because it is not a monorepo tooling, it is productivity tooling. For me personally, we use it in monorepos, of course, but I don't really like that advertisement, because that makes people think I don't need it. No, you need it. It will make you productive whether you are in a monorepo setup or not. So generate a new project using NX. Then you can start extracting or creating libraries from the start. You can have the for example, if you are using translations in your project, you can put the translations into the library, and then maybe you will reuse them in end-to-end tests, and you don't have to manually copy-paste everything. Put the models there, so multiple projects or multiple libraries can reuse the models. Put the pipes, everything, UI components. You can start doing the proper architecture from the start. Then you put strict ESLint settings there. We are using, as a company, as many companies do, very strict ESLint settings. We migrated everything from the TSLint, how it was before. We are again at the beta stage as we were aware, and I can say that in our ESLint setting, we are already saying that you should prefer to write immutable code. We don't really allow mutable code. Even you can of course disable this or locally, but in most of the cases it is preferred to do it in a functional immutable way, and we really like it if it's done that way. Then we have all I said typings, and then some other common things. But there are also things like one of my talks, which I had recently in India, is that you should really start using trackby, because trackby is basically the absolute minimum of UI performance. If you are not putting trackby into your NG4, you are losing, probably you are losing a lot of computing power in rendering. So again, tracking, if the trackbar is used, it is a good rule. A lot of rules there, very strict. And I also say that it is much better if computer is yelling at the programmer than if you are doing it in the code review. And of course, yelling is in a quotes. I don't really yell at people. I'm quite. I'm actually a pretty chill guy. So. That is not my case, but I already experienced where people are much easier to convince if you give them an explanation, actually point out the pros and cons, and then just put it into the static analysis, and don't ever mention it again in some random pull request. You really want to avoid that.
What are some of the limitations of Angular router when it comes to lazy loading?
Angular router had much more limitations a few months ago than it has now, or let's say a year ago. Now some of the things have actually been taken care of. One of the really nice things I've seen recently, I don't really know where, it was either some talk or Twitter or something, but if you remember how we used to write the dynamic import, and then the module, and then M, and then the M something module. So you can do that with standalone components right now. You can write the same thing but with component. Somebody showed that you can actually completely skip the then c.component part, and you can just put a dynamic import to the component there if you use export default component name. So if you export default your components or pipes or directives it is already much simpler and much less code to write. It is still the same type-safe code. It is really nice. I like it. And there are also other things that are becoming much easier. For example, many people don't realize it, but the functional inject that allows us to use the dependency injection in many other places or code structures will actually allow us to do fine-grained lazy loading much easier, where we don't really need to overthink how we structure the modules and put code together so it lives properly. If you do not have a very complicated case of that something is singled on and it should die on a certain routes, when you are really just having a case where you need to lazy load the library or initialize a module, you can achieve great things that will be very simple with this. So the router is getting less complicated in this, which is a good thing. Then there is, of course, the limitations. I cannot remember from the top of my head what was the last thing I said I wish router could do, but I know that there were some. So they still have some things to sort out. On the other hand, I think they are very close to being addressed, because even stuff that was not able to be addressed in past because of life cycle of the route and everything. Yeah. For example, I remembered. Thank you for following my thoughts. So there is a way how you can dynamically create components, and if you imagine that some of your components might rely, as I said, on feature stores. There has been a case where if you dynamically create with a factory the component that basically has a context and a module, it would not behave the way that you would actually expect it to behave. Or in other words, it would not behave the way router initializes it or keeps it alive. Why? Because router actually keeps the references to all the modules. So if the module is created, it will never be created again. This is another case of dynamically creating with factory. If you do this with factory, it will die. The ng destroy will be called, the code will be stripped, the runtime will be stripped out, and when you click on that component again, it will again initialize and it will again. So, long story short, everything was behaving properly, but the feature stores also had feature effects. So each time we opened something that was dynamically created, the effects would initialize again. So suddenly you see a lot of requests going back and forth, and you're like, oh, what's happening? Well, you have effects like 7 times initialized already. It was fun thing to encounter and to actually fix, because like the fix was copy pasting the piece of code from router, but you have to know what's happening.
What are some of the best practices for implementing advanced lazy loading strategies in Angular?
If we talk about advanced lazy loading strategies, let's name it, let's be specific. One of the things I mentioned in these techniques are, for example, lazy loading in an Angular type. One of my proudest moments that I've spent on a project is when I had to figure out how to do something, and I was actually like, let's try this, maybe it will work. And it worked. I lazy loaded a third party, a huge library in a pipe. And I was like, this is such a brilliant way of doing it. Let's see if this is, mentioned or documented, and it wasn't. And I was like, am I crazy? Because of course you will not be like, oh, I'm the only one of the first one. I certain that I was not the only one, but it was not a common practice when I was Googling it. And at some point I realized that it actually has a lot of benefits. And one of the key benefits there is that if you lazy load a third-party library in a pipe, it will not only lazy load only when it's used, but also only if the content actually needs it. Because imagine that you are lazy loading highlight.js code, library for highlighting code. Only if there is a code snippet in your template, from backend, from the data came, and only if there is a code snippet in the data, the library will be lazy loaded because it is not needed otherwise. You say, okay, but then we are waiting for the render time and everything. Not true. We are not. Why? Because of Webpack dynamic import. We use fancy Webpack commands to preload or prefetch. Prefetch in this example, and the browser will actually prefetch this piece of code, and like the library will already be in the browser memory, but it will not be parsed and executed. So you are still saving a lot of precious browser thread computing power, not doing stuff that you don't really need. And it can all be cached. So again, great benefit. Also, for the same code snippet, the same output will be reused again. So, another benefit. You can even go further and minimize it even more intelligently, because we are able to do this with computed class members pretty easily with decorator. And so there are very, very nice things that you can achieve with this. And I also seen an implementation somewhere, again, maybe on Twitter, maybe somewhere else, where people were actually injecting services via dependency injection, which internally have been having, like, the API was designed of that service was designed in a way where it already uses observables. So why not defer lazy load some kind of code library that needs to be there only if the service is ever initialized or some method is ever called, something is ever subscribed. So these architectural changes in how you observe your code can really bring huge benefits into how application can be split. Because in the end, you can always create the wrappers around existing things. And there is also something we already did where we had to optimize a huge dashboard with charts. And there have been many charts, and I guess most of us have already seen dashboard with charts. So you can imagine that it is configurable and users can have literally anything there. And it was not in a scale of human life possible to properly lazy load everything. So we had to create a more creative way. The more creative way was using library named ngxd, and that allowed us to create a wrapper. So we basically generated wrappers for all of the components. It had the same inputs as the component for the type safety and everything, so it doesn't yell. And internally, it would do something like dynamically load the actual component and place the reference into the viewport. Everything works as expected. There were no other refactoring efforts needed, maybe besides the one that if there's something dynamically importing, we are dependency injecting the the feature store. That was a little bit cumbersome, but we solved it, and you will probably too. Now you know this, and it was pretty easy and functioning way of how to do this. And I would say most of these advanced techniques are pretty straightforward if you remember that in Angular we can still work with streams, observables, even promises, because like most of the time the dynamic import is promise. So yeah, you can do this with already existing infrastructure.
What are some of the trades-off of using advanced lazy loading strategies in Angular? And how do you weigh those trades-off against the benefits?
Biggest trade-off, undocumented. All of this that I'm saying is either undocumented architecture that you do, even though everyone knows that pipe can return observable. You are basically leveraging this and returning an observable of some thing that will turn promise into observable, and that observable will map using that library and the value input into something output of that library. So it is not a very straightforward stuff if you really say it out loud. On the other hand, if you open such a pipe and like have a good read and look at these 4 or 5 lines that might be there, you are able to understand it pretty quickly. Even more if somebody did a good job of extracting the business logic of this somewhere else and then just properly putting these few lines together in that pipe. So pipe only does the dynamic import and value mapping as you would expect. Then the only downside you have to realize is that maybe if you don't want to subscribe in that pipe, you will want to chain it with async. Again, some people like it. I do. I like chaining pipes. Some people don't. Then you can, subscribing component or use Rx let, for example, like a let directive in your template. Everything will work as expected. So this is one of the trade-offs, that it's undocumented or you have to document it yourself. Other trade-off is that if you really lazy load everything like blindly and your application will basically be an empty one and everything will be dynamically imported, then I don't know, in most of the cases you are not doing yourself any favors. You are basically over-engineering something that shouldn't be done that way. That brings us to when should people optimize? Well, if you load the application and you see that there are things, as I mentioned, text editor loaded on a initial load, even though you will not need text editor at least for another 3 or 4 clicks, then it shouldn't be there. So yeah, then another technique which I call lazy load everything that is 1 click away. So so if stuff is 1 click away, try to do something with it. It doesn't have to be loaded because there is a human or some kind of interaction needed to do that. And a great example for this is, for example, modal window. If you are using different kinds of complicated logic in dynamic modal windows or sidebars or any kind of hidden content that needs to already be there because it is animated in or something like that, try to do it in a way where you actually wrap things around and only after that interaction the whole component service or module is loaded, and it can be achieved with a pretty smooth transition with some kind of skeleton is there and it will drop in. For example, I remember that we did an implementation where whole functionality of how uploading documents in this sidebar will not be there unless you actually start drag and dropping something.
What are some of the future directions for lazy loading in Angular, and how do you see it evolving over the time?
It is evolving slowly. It is not as fast as with other Angular parts. Like to mention a few, we see that forms and the typings and everything that is happening, signal binding, and so this is evolving pretty fast now. Other parts, the CLI with the multiple build techniques or technologies is also evolving. Lazy loading itself in Angular, it is not evolving that much, and you can say that the inject callable inject was a pretty a huge step. Yes, it was, but it was more like a accidental step for the lazy loading. I don't really think like this was intentional. Like it will unlock us in so many great lazy loading potential. Oh, it like people knew that it will allow better tree shaking or standalone components to be much more standalone. Let's call it this way, or parts of the application like interceptors and outguards to be much simpler and probably even smaller. But I didn't really think of it in a way where this is the lazy loading improvement or that Angular is doing something special in this field. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. We had the router based lazy loading for so long that I don't even know people that don't use it. Like, of course, if you are maintaining a horribly old application, then maybe you still have some of the old stuff. I'm not even sure if it's not like removed. So I have no idea what went there. And I'm really glad that we were early in a stage where it was the new norm. Like it was normal for all of the people to do it like this, and it was basically more. You can say that it was more of an opt out. Like no, I don't want lazy loading for some reason, which is there might be valid reason. One of the valid reasons is that you are building for application like for desktop or for mobile, where you expect the whole project to be bundled together, and you don't want to have unexpected cases of things are not loaded or do it manually. So there are valid reasons to completely opt out. But on the other hand, it is still easy to do it in a lazy loading first and then start to handle these cases. So my answer to this question, how do I see evolving it over time, is in a small steps, in the places where we expected some kind of improvement, or in a way where the improvements were just given by something else. Like we went from Webpack 4 to Webpack 5, so suddenly all new things were unlocked. We went to callable inject. We will go to maybe different build system. Maybe we'll go to completely different metadata structure of router. I have no idea at this point, but I'm excited to see these improvements.
Now I have some non-technical questions for you. What kind of person is Vojtech? How do you see yourself?
People usually tell me that I'm very calm person. I can agree. I see myself as a calm person. I also see myself as a very technical person. I have this weird, maybe not for us, not weird. Like if you are a technical person, it's not weird for you, but it is definitely weird for others that you are thinking and all your thoughts are in a very specific direction. I'm also very analytical, so I tend to go very deep into problems. Also, I don't feel comfortable when I don't understand something. So if I don't understand something, I would rather skip the topic than talk about it.
Do you have some hints for us regarding self-organization?
It is cool nowadays to say that you are the ADHD kind, and let's put it this way. I also think that I am. I don't have this diagnosed, but my close circle of friends and family can relate to this a lot because I am constantly struggling with attention, and that means that my work life needs to be organized. One of the first rules I have is that what isn't in the calendar doesn't exist. So if you don't put the meeting, and thank you for putting this one in the calendar, if you don't put the meeting in the calendar, it will not happen. And even my morning, clock I'm setting based on what I see there in the evening. Then there are things that I constantly have to take notes for little things, like just to park the attention, because sometimes things will pop up in the head, and I just don't want to get distracted, so I need to write it down or do something with it. And usually the writing it down helps a lot, because then I'm able to leave it and return to it. And in the code and development, this is usually me creating an issue or writing a to do or fix me command into a code base. But as soon as I do that, I'm able to mentally leave it there, which is amazing that I discovered this on myself. And all the other things that people do, I'm not really sure what works for me. Maybe it will work for you too. And, try to focus in a way where you are really hard on yourself. Like be the hardest boss you can be to yourself in this productive time, because if you let go, then there is nothing easier to then just forget it. And now what I'm talking about, just the small things, like don't go on social media when you have to do something else. Just that urge is strong, but it cannot be allowed, at least not for me. Maybe you are able to go with this. I am not. Even if I open Twitter, suddenly I'm reading through a lot of technical and maybe important stuff for my work, but I could be doing this sometime else, not waiting for some meeting and then forgetting to join on time.
What's about your work-life balance? Do you have some hints for us?
My work-life balance, I would say that it is pretty good now. It wasn't that good not so long ago. I have a home office. Like I already said that I'm head of engineering in this small company. Our offices are actually in Brno, which is the second largest city in Czech Republic. But I live in Prague. I'm visiting Brno. I try to visit often, but of course I'm not going to office every day, not even every week. And I'm basically sitting in this, flat with my 3 screens and 2 computers, and so work-life balance is a real thing that I have to actively maintain. one of the things I found it's helping me is cooking my own food. So I cook my own dinner, and since I'm not very hungry during the day, it usually comes into a point where it is like 5 p.m. I'm hungry and I need to go cook, and that ends my work day. So, do whatever you want with this information, but it helps me. And find some kind of hobby. For me, the cooking is one. I also like to make drinks. Like, I actually have a home bar with collection of a lot of alcoholic beverages which I can mix. I do my own syrups. I created my own coffee liquor from some Colombia plant that I bought.
My last question for today. Which movie would you recommend to our listeners?
I like to watch movies. When I was young, I watched a lot of them. You could say that there is this database list of the greatest movies, and maybe except some of them I've seen it all. And the movie that to this day, I think it is the one that I really like the most, is more of a recent one. It is not that old, and it is called Boyhood. It is the film that was, the funny thing is, or interesting thing about this movie is that it was created over a period of 12 years, where for the full 12 years they were working with the actors, and they are actually aging in that movies, like from kids to teenagers, and like everything is there. And I know this sounds like a cliche. It is not. You know why? Because the director actually made it in a way where he stripped all of the cliches out. There is no first kiss, there is no first alcohol, there is no first weed, there is no first things. There it is just the life, the divorce of the parents, the going to the university, but not the first day. There is like actual struggle in a few weeks or something. It is a very interesting movie.
A massive thank you to our incredible podcast guest Vojtech. Your insights and energy truly elevated the conversation, and I am so grateful for your time you spent with us. I'm stoked to have you back for another fantastic episode in the future.
Thank you.